Hey guys, here today showing you how to replace a CV axle on a 2009 Honda Accord that has a 4-cylinder engine. This is the 8th generation Accord. This was made from 2008 through 2012, so this would apply to those years. Very well might apply to earlier years, but I don't know for sure. So this is a 4-cylinder. The 6 cylinders may also be similar for this year, with the exception of different part numbers obviously, but it's pretty much the same process of taking the wheel off, kind of just moving the knuckle and brake assembly off to the side so that you can get the axle out. You shouldn't need anything special for this. I believe that you will need I think it's a 32 millimeter socket for the axle nut. It could be a 36 millimeter. I will definitely let you know when I get there. But the first thing you'll need to do is to jack up the car and get it on jack stands. I am working on the left side. The right side is pretty similar, with the exception of the right side axle does not actually go all the way into the transmission. It goes into an intermediate shaft, so there is a difference there, and that will be a little bit different than this side. So yeah, I'm just going to work on the driver's side for now because this is the one that's bad. So I got it up. I'm gonna go ahead and take these lug nuts off and get the wheel off. If you don't have an impact gun, air tools, you will want to put the car back down on the ground and using a 19 millimeter socket, break all the lug nuts loose first, and then you can jack it up and go ahead and remove the wheel. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. Another thing I forgot to mention is that if you are not using air tools as well, depending on what kind of wheels you have, you may actually have to jack up the car twice, jack it up, put it on a jack stand, and then you'll need to take a flathead screwdriver pretty much and hammer it right into the middle of here, because it is pinched on there. As you can see, it's kind of pinched on there. If you take a flathead screwdriver and stick it right in here, then pry a little bit just to get that pinch out of there as best as you can. That'll help you loosen up this bolt a little bit easier. But if you don't have air tools or you don't have an impact, you will need to remove the wheel cover from your wheel, which is this guy here. You need to just take this thing off completely if you do have these kind of wheels. If you don't have these kind of wheels and you have aftermarket wheels or something like that, you'll have to jack up the car, take the wheel off, and then from the back side of the wheel punch out the center cap. Then put the wheel back on the car, lower it down on the ground, and then you'll be able to access that nut through this hole here in the center. Because if you don't have impact, you'll need the weight of the car down on the ground to help keep the wheel straight. Because right now, if you try to stick the tool on there and try to break that loose, all that's going to happen is this is just going to spin and keep spinning. So that's not going to be helpful. So yeah, if you don't have impact tools, you'll have to go through the center of the wheel while the car is on the ground to break it loose. If you do have impact tools, then you're good. You can just leave it like this. You should be able to break that nut free, no problem. And that's how it's going to go. So the first thing I'm going to do now is just loosen up this brake line with a 12 millimeter, and then I will get back to you right after that. Okay, now the next thing I'm going to do is to take a flathead screwdriver and I'm going to hammer it right into the middle of this to kind of get this pinch out of here. Just like so. I'm going to go ahead and break this nut loose now. And just like that, it's loose. You should be able to push this a little bit out of the hub. Just if you can't, you can always hammer it out pretty gently, but that came off pretty easily. So now the next thing I'm going to do is take off that 17 millimeter that I told you that's on the bottom of the shock. You just need to use a like a ratchet on one side and a wrench on the other side to loosen it up and take it off. Okay, now I've got this loose. I'm going to go ahead and tap it with a hammer on the other side to get it to come out. You can probably have to use a flathead screwdriver to help it out some more. And it'll come out just like so. Now this whole bottom suspension should be loose. Okay, moving around to this side, I am going to go ahead and use a 10mm right here to loosen up the ABS bracket. It is a 10mm bolt. Go ahead and loosen that up so that you don't damage it. I'm going to go ahead and loosen this one up here as well, another 10mm. That way everything is not really stressed on that wire. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Okay, this will allow this to be nice and free, just like the brake line on the other side. So now the next thing we need to focus our attention on is this tie rod end right here. You see there's a cotter pin that's in there. All you got to do is just, bend the cotter pin down and then pull it out this way. Pull it this way towards the back of the car. Well, it actually depends on how it was put on, but pretty much just bend the thing straight and pull it out. Okay, now that you got the cotter pin out, this is a 19mm socket, or excuse me, a 19mm nut. You go ahead and break it free. And remove the nut. Now will be the time for you to use your ball joint separator tool. I'm going to use my tool. My tool just slides in here like so, just like that, and it sits like this, and then when I tighten it up, it forces the stud up out of the knuckle. Pops it out just like this. It doesn't damage the boot at all. See, it's not ripped or anything, so I can still reuse this. Okay, so now the whole knuckle should be able to turn freely. You can see the CV axle is right here. You've already loosened it up, taken the nut off, so this will be able to see how you can see it moving there in and out. It'll be able to come out freely. The next thing that we need to do before we can completely get this thing out is to loosen up this top nut here. Remember that I told you in the beginning of the video, I like to loosen up the tie rod here and this top one. This is pretty much the same deal. You're going to have to take out the cotter pin and then loosen up that nut and take the nut off. And then using your tie rod tool, you can go ahead and break this ball joint loose as well. Do be careful, because now when you do that, this whole entire knuckle will want to fall down towards you. So just keep that in mind, that you don't get smacked in the face or something like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that guy off now. Okay, this one up here is a 17mm. So you can just break it loose. I suggest maybe just break it loose and then just unscrew it, not all the way, don't take it all the way off, so that way when you do break this loose, the whole thing's not going to fly at you. It'll still be attached here by this little nut. So just spin it down by hand, don't take it all the way off, just spin it down by hand, and that way it's just an extra precaution to make sure you don't hurt yourself. Okay, that one is now loose. So now you can go on ahead and take this nut off. You may have to push down on this to get it to release here a little bit, and then we can go on ahead and lean this knuckle back and pull the axle out. So I'll get you a different camera angle. So So as this falls down, you should be able to pull the CV axle out. And if you just push down on this entire assembly, you can see you have the axle out right there. Now this is out of the hub completely, and now you have room to pull the axle out of the transmission. That will be a little trickier. You'll probably will need actually, if you have a pickle fork, that's good. You can go on ahead and use a pickle fork to pop it out, or maybe a pry bar will help you pop it out, because it is pretty much held in by a snap ring inside the differential. So I'll try and get down there and get you a view of how you'll be able to pop it out. Okay, so we can see that the axle is back in there into the transmission. Usually what I like to do now, if you'll notice, I'm going to compare this side to the other side. Since the other side that's going into the transmission looks pretty much really similar to this side, except that this sleeve here is a little bit bigger. Now when you get down there and you look into the transmission, you'll notice that there is a big sleeve around here like this. What I like to do normally is to get in there. You'll see there'll be a little gap in between this here sleeve and the actual case of the transmission. I like to just get right in here and give it a, you won't be able to get this all the way in here, you'll probably be able to grab like this much of the sleeve, and when you pry it against the transmission case, that usually will be able to be enough to pop it out. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you sit down there and look at it. However, the plastic splash shield is in the way, and I'm going to remove that in order to be able to give me the most leverage to pop this axle out, because sometimes these can be very difficult to get out, and usually when I pop them out like this, they come out easily. You don't want to sit here and try and pull it out. All you're going to do is disconnect the CV joints and the ball joints that are inside here, and then that will be a nightmare to try and get back together. So you will want to get a long pry bar or a flathead screwdriver, or a pickle fork is what I use sometimes, to try and just give that a swift, good pop with it, and it'll pry it right out. But you will need to go through an extra step of moving that plastic splash shield out of the way. It is held on by just little plastic push pins that look just like this here in the wheel well. I'll show you. You can see this one right here. They're held in by these. You just take a flathead screwdriver, obviously not right here in the wheel well, but you will take a flathead screwdriver like so, stick it in there, and just pry this thing out. Well, it's not going to happen now, but you'll pry this out, pull out the center plastic pin, and then you'll be able to remove that splash shield. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the splash shield, and then I will get back with you guys. So now I'm under the car, right where the axle, you can see just the tip of it right there. This giant black piece right here is going into the transmission. This is the transmission right here. You should be able to loosen up this little black shield that was right here. I just removed the 2 pins. Now you should be able to come up right in behind this guy and pretty much stick the screwdriver in, or a piece of pry bar, and pry on the transmission. You should be able to pop it out of place. Like I said, some of these can be pretty stubborn. Sometimes it works really easily, sometimes not. So you'll just have to play with it. Okay, after you get that broken free on the inside, you can come out here and pull the axle out. There may be some grease that comes out with the there may be some grease that comes out that you need to catch with a rag from the transmission. You should be able to pretty much get this guy out through the side down here, just like so, and here you have it. So now you pretty much need to grab your new one, and then you can go on ahead and fit it back into the transmission. I'll show you how to do that here now. Okay, so we got the new axle right here, ready to go in As you'll notice, it has splines. There's also a snap ring right here that needs to get seated into the differential. I like to take and put a little bit of grease on the end of here to try and help it to get this pop in there a little easier. Now you will have to start this in by hand, get it up into the transmission as far as you can, and then I will show you how to pop it into place. You will have to take this shaft and get it back inside this fork area here. Okay, so now you want to try and get it in there as far as you can by hand. Try and push it in there as far as you can. Again, do be careful that you try not to pull this thing apart, because then it will come apart in pieces inside the joints, and that, like I said, is a nightmare to deal with. So once you get those in there, what I like to do is to take the new nut, take it off, that way you don't damage it. And I take the old nut and I stick it on here backwards. Actually, no, I just stick it on forward. Don't thread it in all the way. You're just using this to kind of take the impact so you don't damage the new axle. Now you won't be able to go so far because remember that old pinch was right here. So just screw it just barely to its, it won't be quite flush with the end, but close enough. And then what you want to do is to take a hammer or a small sledgehammer, and while holding this up, you want to smack this in. That should pop it into the transmission. This is kind of an awkward position to be in, but this is the way I do it, and it works for me all the time. As you can see, I rotated this around the other direction because it was easier to get a good hammer on it. You should be able to get it from the other side as well. But you see that? A few whacks, I got it on, it's popped into place, and it's good to go now. So now you see I got the axle into place here. Go on ahead and just hand tighten the new nut. That way the axle doesn't pop out, just enough to get it on there. Now the first thing I like to do first is to put the upper ball joint back into place. If you're strong enough, you can just pull the upper control arm down into the hole on top of the spindle, and then just tighten up the nut. Just hand tighten it to hold it into place. If you're not strong enough to do that, then get a floor jack up underneath here and jack this up so that you can get it up to the top. Okay, now once you got that one in, you don't have to tighten it now, you can tighten it later, but once you've got it started in there, go on ahead and focus on getting the long bolt through the bottom of the lower control arm. You may find that once you get it in the holes, you might have to push this down a little bit to get the holes to line up. You can go on ahead and hit it with the hammer to get it started in there. That one you can go on ahead and tighten up completely now, 17 millimeter. You have to excuse the background noise. The next thing you want to do is to go on ahead and move over to the back here where the tie rod end was at. You can go on ahead and stick that stick the ball joint back into the knuckle and just hand tighten that one. That one was a 19 millimeter. Then you can actually tighten that one up and tighten up the top here. And don't forget to put the cotter pins back into place as well. If you find that the ball joint is just spinning in place as you're turning it, that is common. It probably is going to happen. The best thing to do that I recommend, it doesn't always work, but the best thing to try is to put, say for instance here on the tie rod end, the stud goes straight down into the hole like this. The best thing you can do if it's spinning, or if the stud's spinning around as you're tightening it up, is to put as much pressure on top of that ball joint as you can to hold it into place while you tighten the nut out from the bottom. The same thing up here. You can jack this up from the bottom to try and put as much pressure on the ball joint. You're trying to get the ball joint to be forced down into the hole as hard as you can. That way it'll hold the stud in place. That may not happen. You may just tighten right up. That's fine. But if it does so happen where you can't tighten up the bolt, or excuse me, tighten up the nut, then just try your best to put as much pressure on the ball joint as you can. Okay, now you should have both that ball joint and that ball joint over here on the tie rod tightened up. Also the bottom lower shock mount should be tightened. Now the only thing, well, make sure you get the cotter pins back into both these, stick them in, bend them. Now what you want to do is to, if you reach around the back, you should be able to push the axle all the way in with your hand, and just go on ahead and tighten this here nut by hand. And then just tighten it up as much as you can right now. We'll leave that for now. Go on ahead and then reattach the brake line you see here with the 12mm on the side, and reattach the ABS sensor with the two 10mm. The one that's back here, you can see the hole right there, and the other one that was attached to the side of the knuckle. Don't forget to put the plastic splash shield back into place with the two clips. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, by now you should have everything tightened up. Now we need to torque the axle nut. It gets torqued on this car to 242 foot-pounds, which does seem like quite a bit, but that's what it calls for. So that's where we're going to go. If you have a torque wrench, that is best to use, possibly a long breaker bar if you don't have a torque wrench, to try to get it as tight as you can. You don't want to have it too loose because you risk ruining the wheel bearing, and you don't want to have it too tight because you'll ruin the wheel bearing as well. It'll wear out faster. So 242 foot-pounds is the torque. This car is automatic and I have it in park. I have the other wheel that's on the ground, so I should be able to tighten it up to what I need to right now, even though that one wheel is off the ground. However, if your car is a manual, you'll want to stick it in any gear, probably 5th gear, stick it in the gear and put one wheel on the ground and leave one wheel off in the air. Alternatively, you could probably have someone step on the brakes as well, but 242 foot-pounds is pretty substantial. So if worse comes to worse, you can stick the wheel back on and lower the car slowly down to the ground, just enough to where the wheel can touch the ground. You don't want to put all of the weight of the car on that bearing without tightening up the nut. So you just want to lower it just enough to where the some of the weight of the car is down, but most of the weight is still on the jack. So if that makes any sense to you, I'm gonna go ahead and tighten this up now. Okay, so I got that tightened up. Now, just like the old nut, you want to take a flathead screwdriver and a hammer and just punch the side of the nut into the notch that's in the axle. You'll see it. You can hit it with a flathead screwdriver and a hammer, or a punch and a hammer, or a drift, or whatever you want to do. It doesn't really matter. You can even use a chisel, a flat chisel, to hit it where it needs to be. So don't forget to do that after you've tightened it up. Now you can just go ahead and stick the wheel back on, tighten all the lug nuts up, drop the car down on the ground, and take it for a test drive. That's pretty much all there is to it. This job will probably take you about an hour or so. But by all means, take your time, and thanks for stopping by and watching the video. If you do have any questions or comments, you can always ask them in the comment section below. It's your first time to the channel, thanks for stopping by. I hope that you would check out the rest of the page and see if there's anything else that will help you out. I try to upload videos every week, and I just work on anything that my customers bring in. I work on all kinds of cars, bikes, anything. I am no means an expert on everything, but I have been working on cars for about 16-17 years now. So yeah, if you have any comments, like I said, just ask them below. I tend to answer everybody's questions or everyone's concerns, and unless you're just being rude, then I'm obviously not gonna answer that. But yeah, if you like this video, hit the like button and don't forget to hit the subscribe button on the way out. Thanks, guys.